Hi everyone, my name is Sandeeka and I'm a PhD student looking at the concept of building back better in post-disaster reconstruction and recovery. So today I'll be talking a little bit about some of my key findings on this concept of building back better. Reconstruction of the physical environment following a disaster is a very complicated and demanding task in itself. But what we must remember is that disasters also have psychosocial and economic impacts that we must consider and deal with as well. So this concept of building back better first officially emerged following the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. And what it implies is that recovery should not just be about rebuilding the physical environment and returning the community to its pre-disaster state, but rather that recovery is an opportunity to improve the physical, economic, and social conditions of affected communities in an effective and efficient way. And this then creates a new state of normalcy, which is then a resilient community. A resilient community is a community that is better able to withstand and recover from future hazard events. My research has involved trying to really understand this concept of building back better and present it using a framework. So I've tried to represent this concept of building back better using some key categories and also 6 build back better principles. So the first category is risk reduction. Risk reduction talks about reducing risks from hazards and also improving the structural resilience of the built environment. And this is achieved in 2 ways, through Principle 1, improvement of structural designs, and Principle 2, through better hazard-based land use planning. The next category is community recovery. And here we're really looking at how to support and improve the psychosocial aspects of the community following a disaster, as well as rejuvenate the community's economy. And this is achieved through 2 principles, social recovery and Principle 4, economic recovery. Then the third category is implementation. Implementation talks about ways in which risk reduction and community recovery practices can be implemented in an effective and efficient way. And this is achieved through 2 principles, Principle 5, better management of stakeholders, and Principle 6, through the use of legislation and regulation. Then the final category is monitoring and evaluation. Now this category stretches across all the above mentioned principles and categories, and it's really important to building back better. Here we are looking at putting systems in place through all the different stages of recovery and through all the recovery activities to really make sure that we are in line with our build back better concepts and also to take lessons learned so that we can improve future practices. And what I've been doing with my research is I've studied 2 case studies in depth and also collected findings from other international literature to create sets of propositions under each of these principles that really allow build back better concepts to be implemented in post-disaster reconstruction and recovery. So what I'll be talking about in my next few slides is some of the key propositions that fall under each of these principles that are sometimes overlooked. So starting off with the first principle, improvement of structural designs. It's very common following a disaster to revise and improve building codes and try to improve the structural resilience of the built environment. But what we must also remember to do is to provide education to all the stakeholders, including the community, on what these building regulation changes are prior to rebuilding. And also improving structural designs often means increased cost, which are often unaffordable in post-disaster situations due to issues with insurance and other types of funding. So it's really important that we arrange some sort of long-term funding to cover these extra costs to ensure that structural improvements can be done in a timely way. And also it's important to arrange rebuilding advisory services to support homeowners with rebuilding. The next principle is land use planning. And here we're talking about determining appropriate land uses based on accurate hazard assessments, risk zone maps, as well as relevant building regulations. So here we're talking about using an integrated approach to determine land uses. Next, as mentioned in the previous principle, it's important to provide education on any of these changes that are done as well. And if resettlement is an option, we must understand that it's a very difficult time period for people and put in place sufficient advisory services Next, we have social recovery. So a unique aspect of Build Back Better is the focus that it gives on the people and understanding that the recovery is all about the local people. So it's really important to always keep the community informed through everything, and also to rebuild public facilities as soon as possible based on what the community wants so that they can really move forward with their recovery as soon as possible. Another key concept in Building Back Better is to really involve the community in recovery. And involving the community in recovery helps the people to feel empowered, and also it really helps them to move forward with their own recovery. So we can do this by creating community groups consisting of locally elected community members, and use these community groups to design some of these recovery plans and even implement some small-scale recovery projects. Then finally, it's important to maintain full transparency with the community through everything so that everybody's always informed and they know what's going on. Next, we've got economic recovery. Supporting the economic recovery of communities following a disaster is also really important for overall recovery. So one of the first things we can do is identify who our beneficiaries are so that we really know how to support them. Then we can empower locals to re-establish their traditional livelihoods as opposed to trying to encourage them into new forms of livelihood. Then we need to upskill people based on skills shortages, and we can do this by arranging low-cost training programs. Then we can establish business support services to really help and advise businesses through recovery. And again, keep the community informed about everything. And also we can establish temporary retail and workspaces for businesses so that they can start up as soon as possible. Next, management of stakeholders. So recovery, post-disaster recovery and the recovery environment is a unique environment where we have so many different stakeholders all working together. And this often creates very chaotic and ad hoc operations. So it's really important to establish a separate recovery authority that can really act as a project manager for recovery operations. And this recovery authority should be responsible for planning and implementing and monitoring the recovery program, and also to maintain a register of all stakeholders, and also allocate clear roles to everyone so everyone knows what they're doing. Then it's important to facilitate collaboration and partnerships between stakeholders so that we can improve the efficiency of our recovery activities. Then it's also really important to provide easier access to information to all stakeholders by having an open database. And then, as mentioned previously, it's really important to hold training sessions for all stakeholders before recovery activities begin so that we can educate and update stakeholders on any new rules and regulations and anything else that's relevant. Next, the final principle is legislation and regulation. Legislation and regulation can be used in two ways during recovery. Firstly, to enforce compliance in accordance with the Build Back Better principles and themes, and secondly, to facilitate recovery operations. So we can use legislative provisions to establish a recovery authority, to enforce our building regulations and planning regulations, and also in terms of facilitation, we can use it to simplify and fast-track permit procedures for rebuilding, and to expedite the disbursement of funds, because most of the time recovery can be held up due to lack of access to funds. And also finally, to assist and speed up business recovery in particular. So in conclusion, we must remember that the focus of recovery should always be on the local community and meeting their needs whilst improving overall community resilience. So this concept of building back better and the framework that I have presented here can be a valuable tool that can be used throughout post-disaster recovery and reconstruction to really make it a success. Thank you.